Well, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural commentator. And today we're going to be commenting on an article that appeared in Yahoo News about a Muslim family that is struggling to figure out how to celebrate Christmas. And this is, I think, unique to Muslims in the West because Muslims in their Arabic country, like Iran and some of the other militant Islamic nations, they don't have a problem with Christmas because sometimes it's even outlawed and banned. So they don't have to deal with that. But in the West, in the traditionally Christian West, the Muslims who are coming in to live and move and immigrate into Western nations, they have to deal with Christmas. And it's kind of funny that someone who would move into, say, the United States, a Western nation, a traditionally Christian nation, would then complain about seeing traditionally Christian celebrations and holidays. But be that as it is, this is what is taking place among some Muslims. I don't think most Muslims are as sensitive as this woman is about Islam and the celebration of Christmas here in the United States, but I imagine some Muslim families are sensitive about it. But should they be? And do they have a right to be sensitive about such things? Because basically the dilemma is that they are living in now a Western nation, and so they should expect that there would be Western traditions and not Islamic traditions. But her problem is also a problem sometimes for actual Christians who are seeing that our culture is being taken over by other pagan Christmas traditions that are actually somewhat offensive when they start intruding on the real meaning of Christmas. So it would be interesting to see how this woman would react to a true Christmas, a more pure Christmas celebration in a Western nation. But she is reacting, it looks like, more toward some of the more paganish celebrations around Christmas. Well, we'll get into that article. It's an interesting topic. As a Muslim mom, my family doesn't celebrate Christmas, but can't avoid the fanfare. So they don't celebrate Christmas in their home. They don't have probably don't have a Christmas tree. Don't hang the stockings up by the chimney. And maybe they don't even give gifts. I don't know to what extent they do have anything to do with Christmas. But from the article, it looks like they're trying to keep the season totally from an Islamic perspective, which is kind of hard to do, again. If you live in a Western nation, that's pretty much what you would expect, just as if a Westerner were to go to Iran, for example, and live in the capital city. Would you expect to see much Christian imagery? Would you expect to see much Christmas activity around December? Probably not. And you probably shouldn't be offended by not seeing Christmas lights and trees and decorations because, again, it's not a traditional Christian nation. It's a traditional Muslim nation. So you would see their holidays reflected, not the Christian holidays, as would be expected. So let's go down. Here is the woman, and she has a small son, and they're looking at all of the Christmas decorations here, and it says, not everyone celebrates Christmas, but avoiding the fanfare can be difficult. So at first glance, it seems like, wow, we have nothing in common with this woman. But actually, we do, as we'll see later on in the article. Do you want a reindeer, Santa, or snowman? The nurse asked my toddler after taking his blood pressure. He looked at me puzzled, not fully grasping what she meant. Snowman. He'll take a snowman. I intervened to help out. Okay, so look at those things. Reindeer, Santa, and snowman. That is not strictly speaking, a Christmas Christ Mass. The original Christmas celebration has nothing to do with reindeer, Santa, and snowmen. But again, this is somewhat of a tradition that has developed lately. I'm talking about the last few centuries, and especially since the invention of the greeting cards and the commercial industry here in the United States. Reindeer, Santa, snowman, that has nothing really traditionally connected with Christmas, but that's what Christmas has become, and this Muslim doesn't know how to react to these traditions. The doctor's office was decked out with wreaths and ribbons. Again, nothing necessarily Christian or originally Christian about wreaths and ribbons. My son was lured by the decorations. "It's pretty, Mommy," he told me. "It's really nice," I acknowledged. As a treat for how cooperative he was with the pediatrician, we made a quick stop at the library only to be greeted by a gigantic Christmas tree with lots of presents neatly packed underneath. Okay, so that again is a tradition that is not strictly linked to Christ, the manger, Bethlehem, the birth of Jesus. It's, again, a tradition on a tradition. So that's what we're going to be seeing more and more of as we become more and more paganized. The pagan traditions will become the main thing, and the main thing, the Christ child in Bethlehem, will become more of a minor thing, which is a sad thing. Mesmerized by the lights, my son fixated on what was new to him. The librarian bid us a hearty Merry Christmas before leaving. In the process of trying to keep my son at bay, I merely smiled and made an exit with him. Now that is Christmas. Merry Christmas is a truly authentic Christian celebration of Christmas, because what's taking place there is that you're greeting someone Merry Christmas, or you're including the word Christ in the Christmas celebration. And so you're greeting someone Merry Christmas. Now, the secularized version of that is Happy Holidays. So you're not actually saying anything distinctively Christian, so that you could have Muslims, you could have Jews, you could have Buddhists, you could have Hindus, you could have atheists, for that matter, all saying Happy Holidays. So that is what we've seen lately in the secularized, paganized West, is people and companies, especially corporations, on their greeting cards putting out Happy Holidays so as not to offend Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, atheists, and whatnot. But for someone to say actually Merry Christmas, that is a distinctively Christian statement, because we definitely have a lot to be merry about because of Christmas, the birth of Christ, the Savior of the world. So that is a very good greeting, and it goes back further than all of these paganized traditions that are overwhelming Christmas lately. Being a pandemic kid, he hasn't gone out much thanks to COVID-19. It's only this year that we've been exploring more and more. In the process, a newfound issue is coming up, explaining the holidays, mainly Christmas, to my son. Now, that's a challenge for every parent. That's a challenge for Christian parents, explaining all of the new paganized traditions that are popping up everywhere. So you have the core Christmas holiday, and that's something really I believe we need to more encourage, because a lot of people are losing the understanding of what Christmas is all about. But then you have these new paganized traditions like reindeer and snowman and whatever new cartoon comes on the scene, the Abominable Snowman, the Grinch. Again, that's a paganized Christmas tradition. And then all of the movies that are out there. Even A Christmas Carol, which is a really nice story and really powerful story, too, of transformation of Scrooge from a grump to a really great man, generous man. And that's a great tradition. But again, that is more of a paganized tradition around the holiday, Christmas holiday, than it is going all the way back to Christmas. Even though the story is very Christian, the transformed life is very Christian. So it says, while folks are more generous and there is merriment in the air, the choice of words is critical. You see, my family and I are Muslims. Christmas is not a holiday we celebrate. While it is nice to see the decor and lights. In some ways, public spaces ought to be sensitive to different cultures and religions, especially if we don't observe a holiday. So this is really unrealistic. She says, while it's nice to see the decor and lights, in some ways, public spaces ought to be sensitive to other cultures and religions. So she's saying, well, we shouldn't have all of the Christmas celebration and decorations up so as not to offend people of different cultures and religions. Well, why? Why not? Would it be appropriate to go into, say, go to China near the Chinese holiday and say, it's very insensitive for these Chinese to have all of these Chinese symbols around the Chinese holiday, because there are people here and tourists who don't follow the religious and traditional symbols of China. So it's very difficult for us to understand and even appreciate all of what is going on. And so it's insensitive for China to celebrate its Chinese holiday. No, that is crazy. Of course you don't blame the host culture for celebrating its own holidays. That's actually such a self-centered idea, that you would talk to a Western nation and culture and say, you need to tone down your Christmas celebrations because of other cultures that may be visiting or immigrating here, and they don't observe these holidays, so you need to tone it down. No. That is unrealistic, and it doesn't even make sense, because you're asking a culture to not be a culture for your sake. And a lot of times immigrants come to the United States because they like the atmosphere and the culture of Westernism. And so they come here. So they come here and then want to change it to what? Be more like where they came from? Well, if they liked where they came from so much, why didn't they stay there? No, they liked what they saw in the West, and so they came to the West. And so part of coming to the West is encountering a culture that already has traditions and celebrates holidays a certain way. So that doesn't mean that you have to celebrate them with all the gusto and vim and vigor that everybody else does, but you certainly shouldn't be saying we need to do away with them or tone them down even. There are only so many things that we can opt out of without having a feeling of exclusion in the process. I don't know, but this Muslim woman sounds very much like a liberal progressive, a leftist, because she's talking about exclusion, and that's what you hear a lot with the critical race theory and a lot of the leftist propaganda. It talks about we don't want to exclude anyone. And there is a point to that, but that's being way overdone today, to the point where if a person feels uncomfortable in a certain environment, that's considered a, quote, microaggression, and they feel otherly. That's another phrase that the leftists use, excluded. And so this is what you hear also in the LGBTQ community a lot, this idea that they're excluded and they feel otherly, or even the radicals say they feel erased, which is just pure propaganda. There's asking the Christian West to totally dismantle its morality, to carve out a special privileged position for LGBTQ people. No, it's a good thing that the homosexual lifestyle is ostracized. And it was always a good thing that there was a feeling of this needs to be not in any way promoted because this is harmful for not only the individual but for society. But nowadays, the LGBTQ lobby is so powerful that they're trying to make people who actually are moral and have ethical standards that are high according to the Bible, and they want them to lower their standards to accommodate sin. And I pray that the church certainly should not do that, but neither should society in general, the Western nations, lower their values. Well, they have. They have lowered their values, but that's a harmful thing. That's a wrong thing. So just because people feel excluded does not mean something is wrong, necessarily. She goes on, I honestly think that the most harm comes from how it's presented in this innocuous, almost secular tradition when it's rooted so deep, decidedly in pagan. Well, I agree with this Dr. Nuha Mulk, who's commenting on this. I do agree that there are a lot of pagan traditions that are being pushed, and I think parents need to be careful that they don't let their kid just swallow all of this. The Santa Claus and the reindeer and everything like that, that's a fun story. And, it's okay to read the story, but should you tell your child that Santa Claus is real? No, because that would be an outright lie. You can say it's a story and Santa Claus is part of the story, but he's not real. And you can still have the fun, and you don't have to deceive your child into believing in false and fake big fat men that go around in a sleigh and deliver presents. No. In no other area do you lie to your child. You shouldn't lie to your child. And so we shouldn't do so at Christmas time with the tradition of Santa Claus. Although we can have fun with the story, just like you can read stories to your children, bedtime stories, and you don't have to tell them that they're all real, that all of these events are happening. You can say it's a story. Let's enjoy the story. So if this Muslim commentator is saying, yeah, the paganism, decidedly pagan, yeah, I can understand what she says. I can easily see future generations of Muslims celebrating Christmas because it's fun and seems harmless. But it can also alienate our children from our own traditions, she adds. Well, that problem is happening within Christianity because Santa Claus and all of the other trappings around Christmas can alienate children from our real tradition, which is the biblical account of Christ's birth. So I agree with this commentator here. How often do kids complain about how boring and underwhelming Eid celebrations are? That's a Muslim holiday. There's no communal sense of joy on Eid unless you really make an effort to be involved in mosque and community. It can fall on a random weekday. There is very rarely a celebratory spirit. I think the message children take from that is our holy days are unimportant. Well, I don't know about the Muslim holy days. It sounds like they are pretty boring. It sounds like it's more out of duty than delight, which is a problem for the Muslims. I mean, if you have a holy day, a holiday, it should be something that can be observed with gratefulness and gratitude and joy. So maybe she's complaining about her own faith and saying it's not very fun. Well, okay. Maybe that's the problem. Mulk recalls her own experience trying to conceptualize Santa at age 5. I know Santa doesn't exist, but I want the gifts. And then I got over it because we would buy stuff on sale anyway, she says. Well, how about just enjoying the story of Santa Claus? You don't have to, believe in him. You don't have to believe that he's real. But how about just telling the kid the story and reading it, but not including all of this other stuff that is pagan? Tarmim Khan, a coach and therapist and mother of a toddler, says watching present-day Muslims appropriate Christmas into Islamic culture draws the question as to whether or not these individuals have truly developed their sense of self as opposed to following the bandwagon. That's true. I mean, parents have to really teach their kids what the real meaning of Christmas is and not just let them buy into all of the commercialization of Christmas too, because a lot of these things have been driven by companies, card companies, Hallmark, the Hollywood. Some of these traditions, like the Santa Claus tradition, have really been empowered by stories that are told on the big screen and on television, especially, for example, like the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer story. That has really caught on since the animated Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer TV show came in the 60s. This is frustrating because ideologies are being mixed, which is confusing to teach to the next generation who are being taught one thing at home and then seeing the exact opposite in social settings, she says. Furthermore, the choice whether to celebrate or not celebrate Christmas as Muslims causes an unspoken divide, which can be alienating for some, facing judgment for upholding religious values as opposed to fitting Christmas into Islam because it confuses and blurs the lines between religion and culture. Well, there is a confusion and blurring between religion and culture. And again, this is something that Christian parents need to struggle with in respect to the real Christmas story, the Bethlehem narrative. We want to teach kids and we want to promote and celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ and the biblical account of that occurring. And all of this other stuff can be distracting. It can be confusing to kids. And I think it is. And we need to really be careful that we don't let them see Christmas as just everything that is thrown at us in culture. Now, for the Muslims, it's really hard because they reject the Christian nativity and they reject Jesus born in the manger. They reject the core of the gospel. So they have a really contradiction here. But again, if they don't want to have this problem, then there are countries in this world that don't have this problem of Christmas celebrating. But if you're going to come to a Western traditional Christian nation and then you see this Christmas tradition that is developed, you really can't complain. There's no room to complain. Children thrive on consistency, she adds, which means that learning one thing from religion and family life that doesn't translate into social settings causes a split in identity and confusion regarding the sense of self. That can be a problem for Muslims. And that should be one of the factors that is considered before coming to a Western nation. It can be a problem in other areas as well. This is why Kush Rahman, mother of 3 children, strategizes her visits in public places during this time. She recently went to a children's museum only to hear jingle bells blasting. Her daughter immediately committed the song to memory. By contrast, Rahman notes that there are no tunes that play during Eid or Ramadan, which is bothersome. Yeah, it's a troubling thing. Why doesn't her Muslim religion celebrate with music? Similarly, when going to the library, she divides the trip between her husband and herself, gather whatever books and DVDs they want to choose for their children so they don't have to deal with the kids being exposed to the festive fanfare. She says her request to libraries that they treat Eid and Ramadan in the same manner with events and activities has often been ignored. Yes. Really? Can you imagine a Christian going into Iran and saying, hey, you don't have a lot of Christian books here. I'm just wondering, why can't you produce more Christian books? They would laugh at you. Of course, because it's a different culture. Again, this is not very intelligent to expect that. For now, she's focusing on understanding that I can make it a change of environment or a change of conversation for my kids. I was upset at the beginning because I wanted to protect my children as much as possible. But then I explained to myself that I can't always close my kids' eyes everywhere they go and take them away in every situation. They'll have to figure it out on their own, what I've taught them to walk about from situations that don't matter to them. Mulk is worried about how this whole phenomenon can be more alienating as her daughter gets older. Right now, she's far too young to know what is happening, but it's always hard to explain to a 5-year-old child why we don't participate in this holiday. I expect her to feel less than and rejected for not participating in gift giving and other activities like I did. It will be up to me and her dad to contextualize that and ground her in our own traditions. So, they're having to grapple with all of the traditions of Christmas. And again, it's not very realistic that a Muslim coming to the West should expect anything less than whatever the Western traditions are. But the point is that she's dealing with a problem that many Christians have to deal with, and that is all of the traditions around Christmas. And they are growing and growing and growing. And we have to actually do something about what she's doing in the Muslim perspective. We need to say, well, we don't, for example, there are some traditions that Christian parents should say, hey, we don't go in big for this kind of Christmas tradition. We don't take Santa Claus and the reindeer too far. We like to read the Christmas story and see what it's all about, but we don't go to Santa Claus pageants and Santa Claus celebrations. No, that's a story that's crept into the Christmas tradition. But what we celebrate is the reality of Jesus Christ born in the manger. We celebrate the nativity story where the shepherds in the fields received the message from the angels. They went to the baby Jesus in the manger. We celebrate the wise men coming from the east to bring gold, frankincense, and myrrh to the baby Jesus. We celebrate the reality of Christmas, and we don't get caught up in the pagan traditions that have developed in addition to the real reality. So that's what Christian parents probably should be doing, and it's a good idea to think about such things. Well, we'll talk to you next week on another program. God bless.